Why most people never reach their potential. Picture yourself in a quiet room years from now. The house is paid off. The kids are grown. The career is behind you. And in that silence, the kind you've spent your whole life avoiding, a single question surfaces, slow and heavy, like something that was always waiting. Did I become everything I was capable of becoming? Not did I make enough money. Not was I liked. Not did things work out. That question. And the disturbing part, you already know the answer. You've always known. You feel it in the things you postponed, in the version of yourself you kept deferring until you felt ready, in the quiet distance between who you became and who you sensed you could have been. Here's the harder truth. Most people will never ask that question while there is still time to change the answer. They will stay comfortable. They will stay distracted. They will stay safely approved of. And they will arrive at the end of their lives not with a single catastrophic failure, but with thousands of quiet surrenders they barely noticed making. This is not a video about motivation. Motivation is cheap. This is a video about why, the specific, identifiable mechanics by which human potential dies quietly, one decision at a time. 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor named Marcus Aurelius wrestled with these exact questions while governing the known world and writing private notes he never intended anyone to read. 500 years ago, a Florentine strategist named Niccolò Machiavelli dissected the psychology of why capable people remain mediocre. And today, modern psychology has mapped these same mechanics with empirical precision. What is striking is not that these perspectives exist. What is striking is that they arrive at the same conclusions through entirely different methods, across entirely different centuries. That convergence is worth taking seriously. The first reason most people never reach their potential is that they never learn to think for themselves. This sounds obvious. It is not. Marcus Aurelius, writing in Meditations in a book addressed to no one but himself, returned again and again to the danger of absorbed assumptions. Not because society is malicious, but because human beings are naturally porous. We inherit definitions of success before we examine them. We absorb someone else's measure of a good life, someone else's hierarchy of what matters, and then spend decades optimizing for it, never pausing to ask whether it is actually ours. Marcus described a person who appears independent while living entirely according to the crowd's script, the costume of autonomy worn over the architecture of conformity. Machiavelli approached this from the opposite direction. Not through virtue, but through power. A person whose judgment depends entirely on external validation, he observed, can never be fully effective. Their direction is always determined elsewhere. They are permanently one opinion away from changing course. Modern psychology has given this a precise name and a rigorous body of evidence. Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, in their foundational development of self-determination theory, identified autonomy as one of the three core psychological needs underlying human flourishing. Critically, autonomy does not mean rebellion. It means acting from values you have genuinely examined and endorsed, rather than values you absorbed because they were ambient. Their research shows consistently that individuals with higher autonomy demonstrate stronger motivation, greater persistence, and more meaningful achievement, not because they are contrarian, because they are directed from the inside out. And yet genuine autonomy is surprisingly rare because it requires something deeply uncomfortable. Sitting with your own thoughts long enough to discover what you actually believe. Today, the crowd no longer gathers in the marketplace. It lives inside your phone. Algorithms compete for your attention with surgical precision, feeding a constant stream of borrowed priorities. Most people spend hours each day consuming other people's opinions about politics, success, health, relationships, and meaning. and almost no time examining their own. You cannot build an extraordinary life using second-hand convictions. Because greatness requires commitment. Commitment requires genuine belief, and genuine belief requires ownership. No one can do that thinking for you. The practical application is this: 15 minutes each day without stimulation. No music, no podcast, no notifications, just a notebook and a question. What assumptions am I currently living under? And which ones have I actually examined? This sounds trivial, it is foundational. Because the ability to think independently is not a personality trait. It is a discipline, and without it, every other form of development rests on borrowed ground. The second reason most people never reach their potential is that they trade greatness for approval. This exchange happens so gradually that most people never notice it occurring. As children, approval keeps us safe. As adults, it keeps us small. Marcus Aurelius understood this with unusual clarity. He did not dismiss the opinions of others because he was indifferent. He dismissed dependence upon them because he understood what dependence costs. The person who constantly seeks external validation hands control of their emotional state, and therefore their direction, to strangers. And once that happens, real freedom becomes structurally impossible. Machiavelli made the same observation in more uncomfortable language. One of the most controversial claims in The Prince is that the desire to be universally loved can become a liability when it distorts effective action. This is routinely misread as a defense of cruelty. It is not. It is a diagnosis of a specific psychological distortion. When approval becomes the primary objective, decisions begin to serve perception rather than reality. You say what is popular rather than what is true. You choose what is comfortable rather than what is necessary. You avoid the risks that might lead to criticism. Slowly, your life reorganizes itself around maintaining acceptance rather than pursuing purpose. And purpose has a habit of requiring disagreement. Every meaningful achievement involved someone defying the existing consensus. Every innovation challenged what was assumed to be settled. Every act of genuine courage ran the risk of disapproval. The crowd praises greatness after it succeeds. It rarely supports it while it is being built. Social psychology has documented this dynamic with a rigor that should disturb us. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments demonstrated that when a group unanimously gives the wrong answer to an obviously simple question, a substantial number of individuals abandon their own accurate judgment and agree with the group. Not because they are incapable of reasoning, because the psychological force of belonging is genuinely powerful. Conformity rarely announces itself. It appears in the career path chosen because it impresses others. The business never started because someone disapproved. The idea never shared because criticism felt possible. The conversation never had. Potential is rarely destroyed by one catastrophic decision. It is suffocated by 1,000 acts of social caution, each one too small to notice. The question this raises is direct. If approval cannot guide us, what should? Marcus would say, reason. Machiavelli would say, reality. Deci and Ryan's research would say, intrinsic motivation. All three answers point in the same direction. Your actions must be anchored in something more durable than applause. Because applause is unstable. The crowd that praises you today may condemn you next year. The third reason most people never reach their potential is the one that receives the least attention. They have never learned to be alone. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire and found his most important retreat inside his own mind. He observed that people seek quiet in the countryside while ignoring the quiet available within themselves. Constant occupation produces very little reflection. Machiavelli made a parallel argument from a strategic perspective. Distance creates clarity. Leaders who remain immersed in the passions of the crowd become reactive. They lose perspective. Modern research on positive solitude consistently finds that chosen voluntary periods of aloneness contribute to self-reflection, emotional regulation, creativity, and identity development. The key distinction is voluntary. Loneliness weakens. Constructive solitude strengthens. This loops back to self-determination theory. Deci and Ryan argued that autonomy is a fundamental requirement of psychological flourishing. Solitude is often the environment in which that autonomy takes root. Because autonomy requires space to question whether your current path genuinely belongs to you. Many people spend years becoming more efficient at living a life they never consciously chose. They improve their execution without examining their direction. Solitude interrupts this process. The practical exercise. Once each week, take a 1-hour walk without your phone, without a podcast, without music or conversation. Notice your resistance to this suggestion. That resistance is information. Observe what concerns surface when external stimulation disappears, what problems your mind returns to, what goals keep asserting themselves. These are signals that constant distraction keeps buried. The most important decisions in life rarely emerge from intense activity. They emerge from sustained reflection. The fourth reason is perhaps the most pervasive: the pursuit of comfort, quietly disguised as wisdom. Modern civilization has become extraordinarily effective at reducing friction. Food arrives instantly, information arrives instantly, entertainment arrives instantly. Discomfort has become optional in a way it never was before in human history. This is a genuine achievement. But it introduces a specific danger. When comfort becomes the highest value, growth becomes secondary. Marcus returned to this repeatedly. From the Stoic perspective, comfort is not evil. Dependence upon comfort is. Because dependence creates fragility. The person who requires ideal conditions becomes incapable the moment conditions deteriorate. And conditions always deteriorate. Machiavelli articulated this through his concept of virtù, a word routinely mistranslated as mere virtue in the moral sense. For Machiavelli, virtù was something closer to effectiveness, adaptability, the capacity to shape circumstances rather than simply be shaped by them. Such qualities are not inherited. They are forged through resistance. A smooth sea produces very few skilled sailors. Modern psychology makes the same argument with empirical precision. Donald Meichenbaum's development of stress inoculation training demonstrated that controlled, graduated exposure to manageable challenges measurably increases an individual's capacity to handle larger challenges later. Resilience functions like a muscle. It grows through use, not through avoidance. And Anders Ericsson, whose research on deliberate practice established the foundations of expertise science, found that the highest performers in any domain consistently spend significant time operating just beyond their current competence. Not so far beyond that failure is guaranteed, but far enough that adaptation is required. Growth occurs at the edge, not in the center. Consider how this appears in everyday life with uncomfortable specificity. A difficult conversation is postponed. A new skill is delayed until conditions feel ideal. An important project remains unfinished because confidence hasn't arrived yet. A business idea stays inside a notebook. A promotion is never pursued. In each case, comfort wins a small victory, and potential suffers a small, invisible defeat. The tragedy is not immediate. That is precisely what makes it dangerous. The cost of comfort doesn't appear in a single day. It appears years later as unrealized capacity, as abandoned opportunities, as versions of yourself that never emerged. Marcus repeatedly reminded himself, stop debating what a good person should be. Simply become one, not tomorrow, not when inspiration arrives, not when certainty solidifies. The evidence from Albert Bandura's research on self-efficacy reinforces this almost uncomfortably. Confidence is more often the result of successful action than its precondition. Many people are waiting to feel ready before they act. The evidence suggests acting is frequently what creates readiness. You become capable through doing, not before doing. The fifth reason is closely related, and it operates beneath the surface, allowing emotions to govern decisions. Marcus Aurelius understood that emotions themselves are not the problem. The problem is surrendering judgment to them. He returned obsessively to one observation. Events are often less damaging than our interpretation of them. Two individuals experience the same setback. One sees catastrophe. The other sees instruction. The event is identical. The interpretation differs. And between event and response stands a space where judgment lives and where judgment can be trained. Machiavelli viewed emotional control through the lens of power and observed the same pattern. Impulsive leaders destroy themselves not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of restraint. A moment of anger can undo years of careful construction. A moment of pride can blind an otherwise capable person to reality. Baumeister's research on self-control and executive function arrives at a consistent conclusion. Individuals capable of regulating impulses achieve better outcomes across virtually every measured domain. Not because they experience fewer emotions, because they allow fewer emotions to make their decisions. The distinction matters enormously. Emotional mastery does not mean becoming cold or detached. It means becoming deliberate. The strongest person in most rooms is rarely the loudest. They are the ones who remain capable of choosing their response when everyone else is reacting automatically. This is a daily practice, not a permanent achievement. When frustration emerges, delay the response. When criticism appears, wait. When anger rises, observe it before expressing it. Create distance between the emotion and the action. At first, it feels unnatural. Eventually, it becomes the specific mechanism by which capable people separate themselves from reactive ones and compound that advantage across years and decades. The sixth and final reason is perhaps the most quietly devastating: substituting hope for strategy. Many people live as though a better future will somehow arrange itself. They hope their finances improve, hope their health improves, hope opportunities appear. Not because they are passive by nature. Because desire without strategy rarely produces meaningful results, and nobody told them the difference. Marcus had little patience for passive wishing. Throughout meditations, he returns relentlessly to action. Not eventually, not when conditions improve, but today, with the situation as it actually is. This is one of Stoicism's most durable and underappreciated contributions. It redirects attention away from imagined outcomes and back toward behavior. Not what you want, what you do. Machiavelli developed this through his concept of fortuna, the uncertain, unpredictable forces that shape human affairs. He is often misread as a fatalist about fortune. The opposite is closer to the truth. He argued that individuals possessing virtue are better prepared to exploit the openings that fortune occasionally creates and to survive the adversity it reliably delivers. Preparation does not eliminate uncertainty. It increases the probability of benefiting from it. Two people encounter the same opportunity. One is prepared. One is not. The difference is rarely visible from the outside until the moment it decides everything. Edwin Locke and Gary Latham, in their foundational work developing goal-setting theory, demonstrated with consistent empirical evidence that specific challenging goals produce substantially better performance than vague aspirations. The distinction is not semantic. An aspiration is a wish. A goal is a commitment. And Peter Gallwitzer's research on implementation intentions refined this further. The most effective way to increase follow-through is not stronger motivation, but more specific behavioral planning. Not, I will exercise more, but at 6 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I will go to the gym. Not, I will read more, but after dinner each evening I will read 10 pages. One remains an abstraction, the other becomes a system, and systems outlast motivation every time. This is where many people lose years of progress. They know what they want, they can articulate it with clarity and feeling, but they never translate desire into structure. They mistake clarity of intention for execution. And the world rewards execution, not intention, not potential, execution. This brings us to the framework that emerges when these perspectives converge. Marcus teaches self-mastery. Govern the inner world, because a person incapable of governing themselves cannot reliably govern anything else. Machiavelli teaches strategic realism. Perceive the world accurately because effectiveness requires seeing things as they are, not as you wish them to be. And behavioral science teaches systems. Build the measurable, repeatable actions that transform intention into reality. Because motivation fluctuates, feelings fluctuate, circumstances fluctuate, and systems endure. Together, these three perspectives reveal something that is both sobering and genuinely liberating. Most people never reach their potential not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack talent, and not primarily because they lack opportunity. What they lack is alignment. Their thoughts move in one direction, their emotions in another, their habits in another. Their effort becomes fragmented, and fragmented effort produces fragmented results. The extraordinary individual is not necessarily more gifted. They are more aligned. Their values align with their actions. Their goals align with their behavior. Their daily decisions align with their long-term vision. And over years, that alignment compounds into something that looks from the outside like extraordinary talent or remarkable luck, but is, on closer examination, accumulated consistency. What appears as greatness is usually a process, gradual, unglamorous, invisible to everyone except the person doing the work. The early mornings, the difficult conversations, the repetitive practice, the strategic adjustments. The years of quiet preparation that precede the visible results. Greatness is rarely a moment. It is the residue of a direction maintained. Now we need to be precise about something important. Circumstances matter. Marcus Aurelius knew this. Machiavelli certainly knew this. Modern psychology knows this. People begin life with different advantages, different obstacles, different opportunities, and different hardships. To deny this would be intellectually dishonest. But all three perspectives arrive at the same conclusion regardless. While circumstances shape possibilities, they do not eliminate agency. And agency is where potential exists. The Stoics never promised control over events. They promised mastery of response. Machiavelli never promised a world free from fortune. He argued for developing the strength to navigate it. Psychology does not promise perfect outcomes. It demonstrates that behavior remains among the strongest predictors of future results. Different centuries, different methods, same conclusion. You are not responsible for everything that has happened to you. You are responsible for what happens next. That distinction is powerful. It is the specific place where transformation becomes possible, because it shifts attention from what cannot be changed to what can. The tragedy of unrealized potential is almost never dramatic. There is rarely a single catastrophic moment, no obvious turning point, no defining collapse. It happens in the accumulated weight of postponed decisions, avoided challenges, habits never examined, skills never developed. The process is so gradual that most people fail to notice it until years have passed and they look backward and find not one large failure but thousands of quiet surrenders they barely registered making. This is why Marcus Aurelius returned again and again to the fact of mortality, not as pessimism but as a clarifying tool. Death strips away the illusions that make comfortable mediocrity seem acceptable. It reveals how much daily anxiety concerns things that ultimately do not matter. and it forces a question that comfort allows us to indefinitely defer. Are you moving toward the person you are capable of becoming? Not perfectly, not ahead of everyone else, not without failure or detour, but moving. Because the greatest competition you will ever face is not another person, it is the gap between who you are and who you are capable of becoming. That is the battle Marcus Aurelius fought in private notes to himself. That is the battle Machiavelli studied in the careers of princes and republics. That is the battle modern behavioral science continues to illuminate with growing precision. And it is the battle each of us inherits, whether we acknowledge it or not. Every day your habits cast a vote. Every day your decisions cast a vote. Every day your attention casts a vote. The question is simple. What future are those votes creating? If this discussion landed with you, I want you to sit with one question. Not a goal, not a framework, a question. If you continue exactly as you are today, and same habits, same decisions, same relationship with discomfort and approval and reflection, where does that path end in 10 years? Most people never ask this question seriously. The ones who do often find themselves changing the trajectory of their lives, not through a single dramatic decision, but through the cumulative weight of better ones. Awareness precedes transformation. You cannot change what you refuse to examine. In the next episode, we go deeper into the philosophy and science of greatness. What Marcus Aurelius wrote about in his private meditations, what Machiavelli exposed in his unflinching analysis of power, and what modern psychology has spent decades mapping as the actual blueprint for human potential. Until then, pay close attention to your own life. Observe your habits. Observe your excuses. Observe the small moments when comfort wins and potential loses. And ask yourself the only question that actually matters. Are you building your future or merely hoping for one? If this video resonated with you, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Drop a comment below with one thing you're taking away from this. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share the video with them. See you in the next episode.